So how exactly do you go about regulating an intelligence that is not only incredibly powerful, but is also evolving at a dizzying pace? Do you aim your rules at a hypothetical future, something like artificial general intelligence? Or do you focus on the very real, very powerful systems we have today? Well, the European Union has made its choice, and it's called the EU AI Act. We're going to break down how this really landmark piece of legislation works and what it signals for the future of AI.
Here's the path we'll take. First, we'll look at how the Act defines the very thing it's trying to regulate. Then, we'll cover the new governance structures, like the AI Office. After that, we'll dive into the special category created for systemic risk models. Fourth, we'll get into the specific obligations these powerful systems have to meet. And to wrap it all up, we'll look at what this all means for compliance and strategy moving forward.
All right, first things first. You can't regulate something until you define it. And this is where the EU made what is probably its most critical and strategic decision.
You know, in the early days of these discussions, you heard a lot of talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence, that sci-fi concept of a machine with human-like cognitive abilities. The AI Act very deliberately sidesteps that entire debate. Instead, it creates a brand new legal category, the General Purpose AI System, or GPAIS. This is a huge shift. They're not trying to regulate a hypothetical future, they're regulating the powerful foundation models that we are all using right now.
So what makes something a GPAIS in the eyes of the law? It all comes down to its generality. It's defined by its lack of a single specific purpose. Think about a model like GPT-4. It can write a poem, it can code a website, it can draft a legal document. It's this incredible flexibility that actually becomes the legal hook, allowing the Act to place responsibilities squarely on the shoulders of the model's original creator.
And that legal hook is so important because it solves something called the value chain problem. Before this, there was this massive liability gap. Imagine a company creates a powerful foundation model. Then, a smaller company uses it to build a high-risk medical diagnosis app, and that app turns out to be faulty. Who's to blame? The GPAIS category closes that gap by saying the initial responsibility starts with the original provider of that general-purpose model.
Okay, so when you create a new category of technology to regulate, you also need a new set of referees and a new rule book to go with it. And that's where the new European AI Office and its codes of practice come into the picture.
Now, the Act is rolling out in stages, and while some parts are already taking effect, the really crucial date for advanced AI is August 2nd, 2025. That's the day the rules for these general-purpose AI systems officially come into force. Yes, there's a grace period for older models already on the market, but for everyone else, the clock is definitely ticking.
To help companies figure all this out, the AI Office has been working on a general-purpose AI code of practice. Now, the law says this code is voluntary, but as we're about to see, that word, voluntary, is, let's just say, a bit misleading in practice. Here's why. It all comes down to a legal concept called presumption of conformity. Basically, if your company follows the code of practice, you are legally presumed to be in compliance with the Act. It's a safe harbor. The alternative? You could try to invent your own compliance framework from scratch and then spend a lot of time and money trying to convince regulators that it's just as good. It's a huge risk. So in reality, following the voluntary code becomes the only rational path forward.
The Act is also smart enough to recognize that not all AI models are created equal. Some are just far more powerful and capable than others. So it establishes a special, much stricter tier of rules for models that are deemed to pose a systemic risk.
And just look at the jump in obligations here. While every GPAIS provider has basic duties around documentation and copyright, this systemic risk tier adds a whole new layer of things that are mandatory. We're talking formal risk assessments, required adversarial testing, red teaming, where you hire experts to actively try and break your model, and a legal duty to report any serious incidents directly to the regulators. It's a whole different ballgame.
So how does a model land in this systemic risk category? Well, the first test is a number. A provisional threshold, to be exact. Was the model trained using more than 10 to the power of 25 floating point operations, or flops? This isn't an arbitrary number. It was chosen specifically to capture the most powerful models we know of today, things in the same class as a GPT-4.
But this brings up a really obvious question, doesn't it? What's stopping a company from just training its model at, say, 10 to the power of 24.9 flops, just to sneak right under the limit and avoid all those extra rules? Well, it turns out the regulators thought of that. And the solution is actually quite clever. Instead of only looking at the input, the amount of compute used for training, the EU's Joint Research Center will also look at the output. They'll use a sophisticated set of benchmarks to measure what the model can actually do. And here's the key part. They will update this basket of benchmarks every 6 months. This makes the system dynamic, ensuring it can keep up with the technology and catch powerful models regardless of their stated training numbers.
So, let's get into the specifics. If you're a provider of one of these systemic models, what exactly do you have to do? This is where we see the AI Act really transform abstract ideas about AI safety into concrete, legally enforceable duties.
The first core obligation is rigorous model evaluation. And this isn't just some internal checklist. It explicitly includes that adversarial red teaming we talked about to actively search for flaws and potential misuse. But here's the real kicker. These evaluations must be conducted by qualified, independent, third-party auditors.
Let's just pause on that for a moment, because the implication is huge. With this single rule, the AI Act is effectively creating an entirely new, regulated industry out of thin air. We're about to witness the rise of certified firms whose whole business will be to independently audit the world's most advanced AI systems, much like financial auditors review a public company's books today.
Next up is systemic risk management. This forces companies into a very formal, very deliberate corporate process. They have to identify potential risk scenarios, things like their model being used for sophisticated cyber attacks or large-scale disinformation campaigns. They then have to analyze that risk, formally document what level of risk they deem acceptable, and then build robust technical measures to mitigate it.
And the obligations don't just stop once the model is launched. Providers have an ongoing duty to maintain cybersecurity for the model itself and its physical infrastructure. And critically, they have to report any serious incidents to the AI office. This reporting mechanism is the key regulatory tripwire, allowing regulators to see what's happening when these powerful models encounter the complexities of the real world.
All right, let's pull all these threads together. What does this new regulatory landscape really mean for AI developers, and what does the future hold for this whole framework?
Now, the Act is incredibly comprehensive, but it's not a silver bullet. There are still major questions that need to be answered. For instance, how do you manage accountability for powerful open-source models? What do you do about the thorny copyright issues for models that have already been trained on vast amounts of scraped data? And looking ahead, is this framework ready for the next evolution? Truly autonomous AI agents? How these questions get resolved will define the next phase of AI governance.
And this really brings us to the most important thing to understand about all of this. The EU AI Act wasn't designed to be a set of rules carved in stone. It has been built from the ground up to be an agile governance framework. With components like the AI Office and those constantly updated benchmarks, it has the built-in ability to evolve right alongside the technology it's meant to govern.
So, for any company or developer working in this space, the message is crystal clear. Compliance is no longer a box you can just tick once. It's not a certificate you frame and hang on the wall. It is a state of continuous engagement with the regulators, with the auditors, and with the evolving capabilities of the technology itself. This really does mark a fundamentally new chapter for artificial intelligence.